I remember the feeling of saline running down my face, mingling with my own tears, dripping mud onto the freshly pressed butterfly collar shirt my mother so lovingly dressed me in that morning. I sat in the nurse's office as she washed mud out of my eyes. A group of older kids had jumped me, yet again, kicking the legs out from under me and shoving handfuls of fresh sod into my face for fun. I was shaking, trying to make sense of what had just happened, still remembering how the world went dark as the cold, gritty dirt hit my eyes and its earthy taste filled my mouth. And I asked the nurse a question that had been gnawing at me for months. Why do they hate me? She sighed, cupping my chin, tilting my face up to meet hers, and she uttered the words that would set the trajectory for most of my adult life. Sweetheart, you must be doing something they don't like. I froze. My mind raced. I racked my brain trying to figure out what they didn't like, why they kept pushing and hitting me, what I was doing to make them so angry. And all I could come up with was I was just being me. To my 8-year-old brain, that meant one thing. Being me was the problem. That moment planted a seed that grew roots in every part of my life for the next few decades. Because the logical conclusion was, if being me made people that angry, I had to be somebody better. As one of the most visible of visible minorities in my small northern mining town, survival required approval from the visible majority. In my young mind, that meant one thing: be whoever they want you to be, no matter the cost. I spent decades striving for validation, conforming to systems and expectations that didn't serve me, and accepting them as the way things are, because I wanted to belong where they belonged. And so that became the focus of every decision and action. And as I grew, I perfected the art of conformity. I learned to be whoever and whatever got space in the room. Now, this survival strategy eventually evolved into a professional superpower. In the workplace, this made me what every manager dreams of: a unicorn. Right? You've heard the term, right? Magical, rare, able to do it all. Need someone to support HR? I'll take care of it. Want someone to cover admin while Sally's away? No problem, I've got it. Need someone to look after on-site health and safety? I'll get the certification this weekend. Unicorns are celebrated because they're endlessly adaptable, because we want people to see how valuable we are, right? And any child of immigrant parents will tell you that killer work ethic is our key to success. We are raised with the mantra, the harder you work, the more opportunities you will have. So I polished my horn and saddled up. I excelled at everything. I was the go-to for fixes, solutions, picking up the slack. I moved from department to department with ease. Everyone relied on me, and it made me feel powerful and valuable. But here's the secret no one tells you. Unicorns aren't real. They are a figment of someone else's imagination. But if you're seen as one, it feels like an easy in to belonging, right? Something I had craved since childhood. So you work tirelessly to maintain the illusion. And because your value is tied to your performance, the moment the illusion falters, which it necessarily will, that worth quickly diminishes. So you're stuck. Magical and sought after, but ultimately powerless and replaceable. The price of that magic was my power, my own inner fire. I had to snuff it out to appease others, because being allowed to belong required the silencing of my voice. I wasn't allowed to speak out about the many injustices I faced, the racist jokes, the overt sexism and harassment, being overlooked time and time again for opportunities I worked hard for. I couldn't say anything lest I lose my privileged position as a token member of the collective. Because after all, I hadn't earned my place there. They were simply allowing it. And that's exactly the trap. Because when people place your value in what you can do for them and not in who you are, your value becomes whatever they dictate it to be. But the good news, that fire never truly dies. It smolders quietly in every disappointment, every frustration, every ache, waiting patiently for you to reclaim it. The first embers of my fire reignited one day in the lunchroom at an international services firm that I worked at. My mentor shared feedback that few others had had the courage to share so boldly. I wanted to apply for a leadership role because, as a management favorite, I assumed I would be a shoo-in for the job. She didn't even look up from her salad, or I don't know, maybe it was shepherd's pie. She didn't look up, regardless. And she said very matter-of-factly, "Look, it doesn't matter how much you do for them. At the end of the day, you're still a brown woman. And if you haven't noticed, that is not the look leadership goes for." That was the first time in my life someone had told me to my face a truth I had long suspected, but had continually refused to acknowledge. And it was like tasting that gritty dirt in my mouth all over again. This is not just a workplace phenomenon. Women of color face a unique and exhausting reality in every aspect of life. Navigating a world that continually undervalues us as people means constantly feeling the need to prove we belong. This too often translates into overperforming, pushing ourselves harder just to counteract stereotypes and biases. Work harder, do more, be more. It's the magic formula our parents promised us would get us ahead. But this way of being takes an enormous and exacting toll on our lives, on our careers, and our sense of self. Because conforming to the dominant norms of the places that we covet forces us to silence ourselves to avoid standing out in the wrong way. It's what researchers call minority stress, the chronic weight of trying to prove we belong in spaces that were not built for us. I didn't have a name for it as an 8-year-old, but I had become the poster child. What it took me too long to understand, to learn, to really, really take in, was that this way of being isn't just unsustainable, it's a betrayal of yourself. The constant need to overperform can lead to burnout, characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, and the mental toll it takes is absolutely incredible. Research shows that women of color experience higher rates of burnout than their white counterparts, exacerbated by systemic racism and unconscious bias. This pressure to conform to others' expectations results in losing what makes us special and unique in the first place. We are required to silence our values, our culture, our language, our perspectives, and our personalities, because they necessarily show the cracks in our facade. We become people pleasers who are required to get the validation of those around us in order to feel like we even exist. And that betrayal, it's that we become unwittingly complicit in our own exploitation. I reached my breaking point not in a dramatic, fiery moment, but in a series of pats on the head that I took as small, hollow victories. One moment in particular stands out. My boss wanted to groom me to take over his role when he left. "You're invaluable," he said. "This department couldn't run without you." So for months, I worked harder than ever. Late nights, weekends, missed milestones in my children's lives. And after a year, the position was handed to someone else. I didn't even get a courtesy interview. When I finally plucked up the courage to ask why, a friend on the hiring committee shared some confidential feedback. "There are a lot of new initiatives coming out this year, and management felt you were more valuable where you are. You get more done than anyone else." Initially, I felt flattered. But as the comment bounced around in my brain, I began to feel trapped. I wasn't being rewarded for my value to the team. I was being exploited for it. I had allowed my need for validation and approval and belonging to allow others to dictate what I was able to do. I had forgotten that I'm allowed to have dreams of my own, dreams I assumed hard work would make them naturally acknowledge. And in that moment, the truth finally became crystal clear. No matter how much glitter you pour on it, a unicorn is still just a workhorse. In that moment, I knew something had to change. Now, around that time, I was watching Game of Thrones. Spoiler alert. I mean, it has been 15 years, but still, spoiler alert. It was the scene where Daenerys Targaryen walks into the fire with her dragon eggs. Watching her walk into those flames, burning the identity that others had required her to wear, and walking out as a powerful mother of dragons, that struck a chord in me. And I started to think maybe it was time for me to burn away the masks and identities I'd worn to please others and reclaim my own inner fire. And that is when my inner dragon awoke. Now, regardless of the tradition, we all know dragons are powerful. They embody strength, wisdom, and pure self-acceptance. Everything I had silenced in myself to remain palatable to the herd. For women, especially women of color, the script has often been to shrink ourselves to avoid being seen as threatening or different. To instead stand out by putting your head down and doing as you're told, waiting for other people to see you for who you are. Well, I was done waiting. My dragon had not just sprung forth overnight. It had been forged in fire. The fire of every no I swallowed, every boundary I ignored, every identity I had constructed to belong. I realized dragons don't perform. They embody. Dragons don't seek approval. They're happy with who they are. They attract belonging by being exactly as they are because they know that's what makes them unique and powerful, and people are naturally attracted to that. What if we embraced the essence of the dragon instead of the unicorn? The first time I said no to a project that didn't align with my goals, my values, or even what I wanted to do at that time, I felt an initial wave of fear. But soon, I felt the embers of my own fire reigniting. Saying no was not just a boundary, it was a declaration of self-worth. And the more I did it, the more the right people noticed. They saw the value in my strength, in my confidence, and in the truth of who I was. And you know what? They coveted me. When you stop performing and start embodying who you are, everything changes. You stop striving for validation and start living with conviction. You stop conforming to expectations that don't serve you and instead start challenging them. You exude an energy that makes other people around you feel safe to be who they are. And most importantly, it becomes the catalyst to finding the people and the places where you will always be welcome because you belong to yourself first. So let me ask, where in your life are you tying your value to what you can do instead of who you are? It's time to stop playing that person to perfection. It's time to hang up the horn and saddle and unfurl your wings. Thank you.